Hello, welcome back to my channel. I have a Friday Reads today. Probably just be a quick, snappy one. Hope to do Friday Reads quite regularly these days. I have a little bit more time on my hands, or at least alone time on my hands to make these videos. So I think it's a good way of just checking in to see how everyone's getting on and what they're reading, and show you what I'm reading, that I am reading. I'm not reading a terrible amount, but enough to make a video about. So a couple of weekends ago, I guess it was now, there was Wasted Weekend from Criminale, part of his Garb August series, just a kind of a refresher introductory weekend in February that we like to do. I actually forgot that it was happening, but I was reading a trashy book anyway. So that trashy book was The Executioner, Sicilian Slaughter, number 16, by Jim Peterson, which I believe as a pen name for William Crawford. And this one's interesting because Pinnacle and Don Pendleton got into some sort of contractual dispute, and so Pinnacle got Jim Peterson, aka William Crawford, to write this book. And I think Don Pendleton was not happy, and then they got it all sorted out for number 17, which Don Pendleton wrote as a direct sequel to the 15th book in the series, just pretty much ignoring that Sicilian Slaughter ever happened. And I can see why, actually, because I wasn't expecting this book to be so different from Don Pendleton's. It really made me appreciate that Don Pendleton is actually a really good author. Yes, it's trashy men's adventure, but Don Pendleton definitely had a very much of a style that I liked. It was quite philosophical in nature, very much kind of had Mac Bolan think about the state of America and where it's going, and he had a code. He very much did everything he could to avoid any kind of civilian hurt. He very much didn't go after the cops, made sure the cops weren't caught in the crossfire too. Can't say the same for the Jim Peterson book. I think at one point he just throws a grenade into a crowd of people without any care or even thought of civilian life. It's very much a departure. It's much more sloppy. Matt Bolan is not. You don't kind of get the really sniper attitude and thoughtfulness of the Don Pendleton Mac Bolan. Other things as well. I think the only time that Don Pendleton ever used racial slurs like the N-word was if it was during speech to show a character's prejudice. Whereas Jim Peterson had the N-word and the S-word racial slurs just in the regular narration, which was a little off. That wasn't something I appreciated. It was okay. Like, the book was okay. It wasn't, I got over a lot of stuff, but it felt like quite the departure, and it definitely did make me a little bit nervous for when I get further along into the series where Don Pendleton has signed over the reins to Golden Eagle, and he's not writing any of them anymore. I actually really wasn't expecting this to cause me so much reflection upon how Don Pendleton as a writer was. And it's actually quite a nice thing. It actually the thing with trash fiction is there are actually some really good authors, some really good writing. There's really good writing, and sometimes it's hard to tell or hard to appreciate that because it's so like plot driven. It's just kind of about what happens. But I would say the Don Pendleton and Mac Bolan Execution series is quite character driven. Yes, the secondary characters are usually quite two-dimensional or even one-dimensional. But he really does kind of like flesh out the Matt Bolan character a little bit, and he does use him to really kind of talk about how America's becoming this kind of hellhole that's based in basically the gangsters rule everything, and how they're getting into politics and corrupting every power structure in the whole of America, which isn't completely untrue. I very much disagree with a lot of the politics he puts into it, but it's a bit more well thought out than you would maybe expect for just a kind of like lurid men's adventure book. But he also did create the genre pretty much, so sometimes it's not that uncommon for the person who created it to kind of be a bit more thoughtful, and then the people who extend it just kind of see the action parts and the violence and stuff and just run with that part and forget about all the other bits that make it kind of quite popular and very good. But yeah, you probably don't really need to hear me wax on too much about a crappy men's adventure book from the 1970s or 80s. This is probably the 80s now. No, it's still 1973, it looks like. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are gonna read it, but if you ever just happen to see it, I would say you could give this one a miss for sure. I can't remember really what happened that much, other than he went to Italy and went to Sicily and took on the mobsters in the origin of like the Cosa Nostra. Anyway, and then I started The Best People after that. This was originally titled All Visitors Must Be Announced. This is by Helen Van Slyck. I hadn't heard of Helen Van Slyck until I randomly found this in a charity shop one day. Charity shop or a little free library, I can't actually remember. So prior to starting to read it, I did a little research on her, and she's quite the fascinating character. Started writing for newspapers when she was 14, and then became editor of, I think it was the Washington Post or something? She became an editor there at 19, which is, I think, one of the youngest editors at that time, up to that time. And probably is still pretty young for these days too. Then went into, I think, like magazine editorial, and did that until I think about 25, and then got into advertising and kind of marketing execs, and then I think for major fashion brands, makeup brands, and I think in the end became a chief officer for a pretty large corporation. I think she was one of the few women that was in the executive office of a company that had more than $1 million annual turnover, and this would have been in the 60s. So that's quite up there in the echelon of powerful business. So yeah, very interesting. And then basically got to talking to a publisher at a party. Kind of, I think, offhandedly said she wanted to write a book one day or something. The publisher friend was just like, well, yeah, you have to write a book, and you have to write books about the world that you live in, because it's so fascinating. And I think he sent her a bunch of books. She read them and was like, yeah, I can write better than this. Kind of just very audaciously wrote a book, sent off the manuscript, and he loved it, and so ended up in, I think, first book was published in when she was like almost 50, from around there, and then was quite prolific, and sadly died at the age of 59. But pretty much all of her books center around kind of like Park Avenue addresses, and kind of like Madison. Is it Madison Avenue that's the advertising executive? It's very much that kind of world of people. So more like middle to upper class people. But it really focuses on, I think it's very melodramatic and sentimental, which I quite like in books. I quite like the kind of the high drama. I think it also she really focused on, she took like something that was going on in the modern life at the time. So maybe like interracial marriages, or this one I think has anti-Semitism in it. I think basically what has happened so far is we've met our main protagonists, who are Jim Cromwell, and his who was an advertising executive, and his wife, who's a model or an ex-model, and they've basically he's going after a big contract, and they've just been allowed to move into his grandmother's apartment in an exclusive Park Avenue address. It's a Park Avenue cooperative, so they basically had to be okayed by the board. So it's almost like you have your housing associations these days. It's kind of that kind of board where you have to be approved. You can't just buy an apartment there. You have to be approved. And then some of the consensus is that essentially because his grandmother and the grandfather were living there and they were well liked, that the consensus was they couldn't really say no to them. They are by far the youngest people that are going to be living there, and even though they're not known too well by the people there, they seem to have a reputation because they're young, and I think they keep like rough company, and part of that rough company might be that they are friends with like Jewish people and black people. It's that kind of like very much waspy old school building. I've been only at 50 pages in, but it's certainly reading really really good, and I quite like I quite like the kind of it's I can see how it's going to be quite melodramatic, and I quite like the use of taking social scenarios of the times and kind of incorporating it into this kind of melodramatic setting. And she writes really well. I actually think it's really good. And she was very popular at the time. It says here that she sold 1 million copies, I think, of this particular book of The Heart Listens. So yeah, it says million. So I think she was very popular at the time. I don't think anyone knows about her now. I've certainly never really heard anyone talk about her, but yeah, I think The Young Death probably probably didn't maybe help there. I think also the type of thing she's writing, it's not like high literature or anything, so usually it's quite rare for anything like this to outlive its author. But yeah, I think I'm looking forward to reading more and seeing how it goes, and I'll maybe be able to talk a bit more eruditely on it in the next video. But that's pretty much what I'm getting up to. I'd like to know what you're reading at the moment, and what you've read recently, and anything that you really want to talk about, really. Let me know, and I'll see you soon. Bye.